What would you like to talk about?
Well, why don't we talk about the exhibition?
Yeah,
Makes
let's do
sense,
that.
right?
Yeah.
It's always great to show work because I don't do it as often as I'd like to. But this year I'm going to have 3 shows. This is number 1, and the second will be in October, and then the third will be in November, December, something like that. And I've kind of circled back to a classical approach, which I've always been a classicist, I think, as a painter. I'm probably more of a romantic in terms of a writer and a classicist as a painter, but that's okay. I chisel the words, which is a kind of classical form of writing, and I mark out my areas that I paint very carefully and apply many coats of paint, and I'm very much of a craftsman in terms of how I do that. And it took me a long time to figure it out, because the tendency is not to paint that way, at least when I was younger, but now it's the way I want to paint, and I'm comfortable with it, and I like the direction that it's moving. And so I'm dealing with color in terms of hard-edge forms that usually equivocates between ultramarine and raw or burnt umber, sometimes both. I paint over black. I want that absorption of the light, but also I use the metallic colors to get the reflection of the light. And my point of view as a painter is that I want reflection and absorption to essentially be part of the same process. And this is something in my travels to the Far East over the years that I've become very interested in issues of Taoism and Buddhism and so forth. And I have a Chinese son. I live with a Korean woman, so that intensifies some of those feelings, I suppose. But the point is that Taoism does not see a split or a division between these forces of energy of the yin and the yang. And they don't have a specific gender identification the way Westerners often make that association. But they're 2 very necessary forms of energy in terms of the life structure, and I think in terms of art. And when I have this reflectiveness on the surface through the metallic paints, and this absorption through the umbers and the ultramarine, which is often very dark, it's like light is absorbing and reflecting instantly. And I see that as a kind of metaphor of human being, okay? That, as we reflect ourselves, or as we are reflected in the other, of course the whole idea of the other is also a very un-Asian idea. That's a Western idea, okay? The Asians don't really talk about the other in relation to the self so much. But that is built into a Western form of thought. It's built into our psychoanalysis and so forth. There's always the self and the other. One time I wrote an essay many years ago for an exhibition called Samadhi, the Contemplation of Space, and that was at the Chelsea Art Museum. And I used the term undivided self, and one of the readers from the MIT press said, "Well, I understand in Buddhism there is no self. What is Mr. Morgan talking about?" And I wrote back and I said, well, if I use the term undivided self, that's no self from a Western point of view, because in Western point of view, every self is divided in relation to the other. Do you understand my point? And so, with the yin-yang, it's there are 2 forces that are part of the same phenomena. It's the structure of the universe in a way, and in another way, it's the structure of how one exists in the world in relation to nature. There's the phone, and I'm at this strategic time. Let me just look at it and see who that's from, Sujan. Can you see?
Help center.
Huh?
Help center. Maybe nothing.
What?
Help center.
Forget
Help
it.
center.
Forget it. Okay. Just let it go. Okay.
Echo?
No, forget it. Oh, you can hear my voice on the phone there. We have technology here that's from 1910. I mean, but getting back to what I was saying, so these forces of yin-yang, or what the Koreans sometimes refer to as um-yang, okay, are really part of the same thing, the same energy. And what I try for in these paintings that I'm doing in terms of the reflection absorption is the same phenomenon happening instantly for the viewer, so that that experience is felt within the work. That's what I'm getting at. I try and keep the paintings relatively modest in scale. I'm interested in scale, and you may remember, Jeffrey, that in two cases there was a smaller painting and a larger one that was basically the same thing. A couple minor changes, but hardly detectable, which is okay. But anyway, the point is that I'm not going to go with the scale of L. Held, for example. This is not my point of view. I'm not interested in that kind of literal architectonics. I'm more interested in a modified idea of how one can get into the space of the painting in relation to a scale, not so much as measurement, but in terms of feeling. Okay, this is very important for me.